Here's a situation a lot of DMs might call a railroad. The party boards a ship bound for a distant island. Along the way, they weather a raging storm, battle merfolk pirates, and just as the island comes into view, a kraken rises from the depths and smashes the vessel into pieces, leaving the heroes shipwrecked on the shore.
Wow. I mean, that kind of sounds like a railroad, doesn't it? The whole voyage is laid out, and the ending is predetermined. One way or another, the players are going to end up on that island. They're forced onto the ship, which is forced into the storm, forced into the shipwreck, forced against the pirates, and the adventure marches forward no matter what they do. I wouldn't blame you if you think the players must have had a miserable experience being dragged through the DM's story.
But here's the twist. The players leave the session laughing and excited. They had a blast exploring the high seas and surviving the chaos, and the DM walks away thinking, oh, my players love being railroaded.
But that's not actually what happened, is it? See, when a campaign has a clear story with a beginning, middle, and end, we've seen a lot of people start calling that a railroad. The characters follow the main plot, and it can feel like they're on a track. But here's the fact. That is not railroading. That is just a linear campaign. And that is a totally fine way to run your game.
I love dice. As a certified dice goblin, I have special dice for almost every occasion, whether I'm making a death saving throw, casting spells, using martial abilities, or, those special rolls at the table that might define whether or not my character lives or dies or saves the day. You want special dice for those moments.
And if you want to have the specialist dice at the table, you may want to check out this week's sponsor, the One Dice.
So if you want to become a dice bearer and make those rolls truly special and bring the story to life at your table, this isn't the die that's going to replace your entire bag of dice. You still need all your polyhedrals for all of your, standard actions. But in those moments that are going to define the storytelling and really elevate everything, why not elevate it further with an amazing die?
This die has some incredible weight to it, and it really truly feels like an artifact when you have it with the LCD screen that displays all the animations and all the lighting that glows with your character's identity. The Kickstarter launches September 16th, so act now if you want to get on the early bird pricing for this really cool die. You can follow the links in the description below to become a dice bearer and get the dice of dreams.
If you want in on that, make sure to check the description below, become a dice bearer, and thank you so much to the One Dice for sponsoring this week's video. And now, let's get rolling. Railroading is something else. It's when the Dungeon Master removes player agency. We've talked a lot about this in other videos. When the players want to make a meaningful choice, but the DM forces them into one path anyways.
Railroading involves an active choice on the Dungeon Master's part to block the players from doing something that they want to do. Picture this. Your characters are exploring a haunted house. You want to scout around back, climb in a window, or even blast a hole in the wall with a spell. All of those are pretty reasonable things to do, especially if it's a lower level adventure. But every window is somehow unbreakable. The back of the door is mysteriously missing, and your magic just fizzles out. Although there could be circumstances where all those things might be contributing to a mystery, in this case you're starting to just feel like the DM is just saying no until you finally give up and walk through the front door like the DM was planning. That's railroading.
In this example, there's a lot of spells or abilities or unique features that the DM could be using to tell an interesting story. And Monty, you've done this plenty of times where you present us with a situation where we keep trying things and we are told no because of in-game elements that are actually at play there. But it's when you continuously are trying to come up with clever ideas and the DM keeps forcing you into a single outcome that it starts to feel bad. Another example would be in Curse of Strahd. The vampire Strahd himself finally appears to taunt the heroes. But instead of listening to his monologue, the players decide, now's our chance, and they go Nova. They pull out all their strongest spells, land some critical hits, and spring a brilliant ambush. But it doesn't matter. Strahd has infinite hit points and just disappears in a puff of smoke. There is never any way to change the outcome. That's railroading.
I think one of the worst offenders of railroading is the classic capture the hero setup. The DM decides that they want to run a prison break, so they get this idea that they have to ambush and capture the party somehow, and they're going to play that out. The thing is, and anyone who has ever tried this will tell you, players never surrender, They never run, and they never back down. So even though the enemies are trying to capture them, the players are going to fight to the death. And in this case, the players pull out all the stops. They have an incredible escape plan. Maybe there's some quick thinking and there's some teamwork, and by all rights, the players should win that combat. But then suddenly, every enemy attack is a crit. The players are rolling natural 20s on their saving throws, but still failing against hold person and sleep. No matter what they do, the ambush is unwinnable because not only is the DM railroading them, they are fudging the dice in this circumstance as well to make it unwinnable. So the players all end up captured, and the dungeon master is laughing, "Mwahaha! You've been captured!" twirling their mustache accordingly.
Are you starting to see a pattern? In each case, the DM has already decided the only path forward. And no player idea, no matter how clever, no matter how great, no matter what spells or abilities they use, is ever going to change that.
But a linear campaign would still allow the players to make different choices along the way. In a linear campaign, there is a storyline that the players are following. They are sent to explore the haunted house. They must face the vampire Strahd. They do have a prison that they need to escape out of. But they're given the freedom to decide how they want to engage with that scenario.
Are the players going to sneak in or burn the place down, kill the villain early or try to turn them into an ally, break out of the ambush instead of being captured? Their choices actually change what happens in the outcome of the narrative as it progresses.
Now, the DM always has a ton of power. You're the one that gets to decide what scenarios and situations the players run into. And you also get to decide the outcomes of their choices as well. That's part of the role of being the DM. But the line gets crossed when you start taking their choices away from them. And again, I want to be clear. It's okay for you to say to your players, that idea that you have is not going to work, or this enemy has taken a precaution so that teleportation is blocked in here. That's not railroading. That is adding to the scenario itself. And those can all be justified narratively. Where you cross a line, especially, is when the players surprise you with something and you just decide that can't work because that's not what you had planned to happen. You were choosing the outcome of you needed them to make a specific choice. You needed the encounter to go a specific way in order for your plot to work. I mean, it's great when your players do decide the most likely or obvious thing. And I will say that experienced dungeon masters often know lots of tricks to get the players to do the thing that they want to do without making them feel like they're being railroaded. And there's a lot of nuance. Oh, nuance.
My
Nuance
favorite word.
to this. But the key thing is that you really don't want to force the players into a particular outcome no matter what they try. That's when it turns into railroading.
There's a difference between a clever villain who, let's say, is a great mage who uses all sorts of protective spells like guards and wards and private sanctum and all of these elements that cause the players to have to navigate it in a unique way.
To try a new strategy.
Maybe they have to fly to enter it. Maybe they can't teleport. Maybe they're in a whole area that dispels all magic. These are cool things to play with. But if your players come up with a clever way to circumvent all of those clever plans, give it to them.
Yeah, you can give your players constraints and say, these types of things aren't going to work. But it's the difference between saying taking a few things off the table or saying this is the only way you can do it.
When we fight an iron golem carrying a shield that has a zone of an anti-magic field on a bridge over lava, you basically have nullified most of our options that we would normally rely on. But in those cases, what Monty as a DM is actually doing is asking us as the players, how clever can you be in circumventing or going around this?
Yes, right. And obviously the players still want to get to the other side of the door in this situation, but that's because I've already created the motivation of why the players want to get to the door to begin with.
Yeah.
Right? The golem is just the guard, and the players don't have to fight or destroy the golem in this case. They could have done other things, which is exactly what they did.
Whenever I think about linear storytelling versus railroading, I think of where the term railroading comes from. Maybe we're showing our age with this one, but a lot of us have played those old arcade shooters where you and a buddy, you grab your plastic guns, the game literally pulls you along rails. Enemies pop up, you blast them, and the only choice that you really have to make is how many quarters you have left.
Now, not going that far back, I will say some of the greatest video games of all time are incredibly linear from a narrative perspective.
Possibly even railroady.
Yes. The Last of Us is basically a straight shot from beginning to end. You're on Joel and Ellie's journey, and you're going to hit the same major story beats as well as everyone else who plays. It's probably why it makes a better TV show than a video game.
I don't know if better's the right
Uh,
word, but
but the story immediately translates to a TV show because it just works,
yeah.
right? Um, Claire Obscure Expedition 33, one of my favorite games, changed my life. But even though you have opportunities to choose, like, what weapons you wanna use, and there's a couple, like, are you going to go to Visages or Saren first? Eh, that has no effect on the overall narrative, but the game is still amazing because it's a gripping journey, the characters are engaging, and the moment-to-moment gameplay is actually still really good and fun. But you have no way to affect the actual narrative in either game in any way whatsoever. Spoilers, but you are not saving Joel. You are not saving Gustav. Those characters are their fates are written in stone, and you have utterly no ability. And oftentimes I have that experience playing a video game, being like, I would not have made that choice if I was given the agency within this. And that's part of what I love about role playing games is that when you watch play a video game or watch a movie, a role playing game is like, well, what would you have done?
When it comes to video games, we're going to use this analogy a little longer. Linear storytelling is very popular in video games.
Yeah.
Some people might feel that a linear game is a railroad when compared to something sprawling like Assassin's Creed or the Elder Scrolls. But in reality, a linear game is miles away from the arcade railroad shooters. It comes down to the player being able to choose how they engage with the world. For myself, a relatively linear video game that I think has a lot of choice within it is something like the Deus Ex franchise. Each mission has a fixed goal. You have to get to the other end of the map and complete the task. And in the opening mission of one of the newer Deus Ex, you have to stop a hostage situation. The enemies and areas are predetermined, but how you tackle them is up to you. Do you sneak past with stealth, go in guns blazing, hack your way through, or take a hidden alternate route? You even have the option when you get to the villain who's holding the person hostage of trying to shoot them and save the hostage or talking them down. Even though the level funnels you forward, your approach is entirely yours. We could even look at games like Mass Effect or Baldur's Gate. These games have a ton of narrative choices that allow you as a player to shape the narrative through dialogue options, which makes it a far shot from a railroad, even though they are still linear stories.
And let's be completely fair. Video games are never going to be a perfect one-to-one analogy for tabletop role-playing games. Because video games are always, at least until we have like the next generation of maybe AI, generative AI, we'll see. Video games are going to be confined to the options that the designers presented. In Deus Ex, you can punch through walls, but only the walls the programmers chose to let you punch through. You can't climb every wall. Some doors you just cannot open, even though reasonably you would be able to as a cyborg super soldier, right? Some areas are just the edge of the map. Video games are far more limited in this respect, and even within Mass Effect and Baldur's Gate, there's branching story options that are always moving the story forward. And what none of the games do well is deal with the consequences for failure or poor decisions, which is, I think, one of the beautiful things about a role playing game. Like, if you fail under certain circumstances in most video games, you'll get that like fade to black. You failed. The hostages died, and you have to just go back and replay the level again. Whereas in a role playing game, we would continue moving forward, even if that kind of thing occurred, and find out where the narrative takes us.
And that's really where the magic of tabletop RPGs comes in. As a player, you can choose to do things that's really only limited by your imagination. Obviously, the rules system in play, you need to be fair to the world that you're creating, and the discussion at the table between the players and the GM. Any wall can be broken down with the right tools, spells, or force. There are no invisible barriers in a TTRPG, except maybe the literal invisible barriers that the wizard put around their sanctum.
And if there is an invisible barrier, there's actually probably ways for the players to get around that or to find a way to deal with that kind of thing. And so this is why I generally take a philosophy with my games of I'm presenting scenarios to my players, not necessarily a plot or a story. Because going back to the ship, if we look at what's really happening there, there's choices everywhere. We could have allowed the players to choose what ship they boarded. When the storm hit, the players could have just had a lot of different ways to keep the vessel afloat or survive. They could go man the rigging. Maybe they could use some spells to calm the seas, brace for impact, ride it out. When the merfolk pirates attacked, we could give them a ton of options on how to deal with that. Maybe they're going to fight the pirates, but maybe they're going to parley with them. Maybe they're going to drop their cargo and attempt a desperate escape. Maybe they even surrender to the merfolk pirates and then stage a counter ambush of some kind. Like, it could really go a lot of different directions if you keep an open mind about it.
When the Kraken rises from the depths, the table is going to go wild with ideas. Do they protect the crew, abandon ship, make a last stand on the deck, throw everything they had at the monster and hope that they drive it back or kill it?
And so for me, as the mindset you want to be in as a DM is that you're presenting your players with problems, and it's up to them to decide how to tackle them. Every moment that you do this, you're giving your players some real agency. And the players can shape how the storm plays out, how the pirate encounter goes, who survives the Kraken attack. The voyage still might land them shipwrecked on the island, but there's a lot within that journey that is their decision.
And as a DM, if you did want the players to end up on the island, there are still plenty of ways to make the path feel open-ended. Maybe the pirates carried a map or spoke of the island. Maybe the players found a survivor's raft drifting at sea. Worst case, once the storm dies down and the Kraken is fought off, the ship could simply run aground instead of being smashed to splinters. The destination stays the same, but now the players feel like they discovered it, rather than being shoved there.
Now, you could run into a pain point here if the whole plot that you had in mind is that the players are shipwrecked on the island and then you're going to do some sort of survival thing where they have to build their own raft and find their way off the island. And so maybe that's where you want to think carefully about how to restructure things in case maybe the players do succeed at fighting off the Kraken. Maybe the ship survives, but it's battered and running low on supplies, and it's desperately in need of repairs. So you still get that situation where the players have to land the ship, and you're still going to get that survival scenario that you're in, but the players' earlier success in fighting off the Kraken now means that they're not in as bad a situation as they would have been before. But then, of course, maybe you can throw another curveball their way and still make that difficult for them. Like, because their ship is there, it attracts more merfolk pirates or something like that. Like, there's always ways that you can make more problems for your players.
Oh, well, we know.
Maybe that treasure map that they found is just so tantalizing that the island is just a natural next step. You just have a shiny something glinting from the top of the island. And how are your players going to resist that, right? And they choose to explore it instead of making it a trap that they're forced into. I mean, the island can still be a trap, right? But you're just not forcing them there, right?
And that's the real difference when we look at railroading players. A railroad forces players into a single outcome. A linear campaign gives them a road to walk, but lets them choose their own steps. I personally love a linear story in my TTRPGs. I can get overwhelmed sometimes when the DM presents me with a world of options and says, now choose. I love a sandbox. I love the open-endedness, but you can literally watch me get stressed out in our actual play, often because I do not feel I have a clear direction and there are more than a few options on how to proceed. Sometimes I really enjoy a moment in the story where the GM just says, hey gang, you have to go slay the dragon in the mountain, but to do so, you have to pass through the spider woods and up the twisting caverns to get to its home. Better gear up. This gives me my direction on what I will likely encounter, and now it's up to me to prepare and navigate that story in the way that I choose.
Yeah, like if we go back to our Kraken example, if the players aren't shipwrecked, they fight the Kraken off. But then they're sailing, and you see in the distance an island. It is a volcanic island with smoke rising from the top, and the mountain is in the shape of a skull. And it looks like there's ancient ruins rising up from the ground, and there are glinting rubies that you can see in the distance.
And that treasure map you just found literally
Yeah.
says there's the biggest treasure ever hidden somewhere on that island.
Like, that is a giant red flag saying fun adventure here.
I'd say a green flag.
Okay, sure. It's just a giant, like, you're waving the flag of saying, here's the adventure. Please, like, please go. The adventure is here. Yes, yeah.
And that's a whole other topic. The players should always say yes to the green flag
Yeah, and
to
that's
participate in the
and that's the
adventure.
back and forth of it. And that's where, like, railroading and sort of the reluctant player sort of archetype can, like, butt heads against each other, because, like, if you have the player that's like, yeah, we see that volcano, and DM, we're just gonna sail right on by. Like, at that would be a point where I would kind of be like, so everybody, like, I mean, I'm
Okay.
comfortable enough as a DM that if my players actually decided to do that, even if I'd prepared a whole adventure on that island, I would be okay with it and I would roll with it. But I can empathize with DMs who are like, no, I worked really hard on that island. You're going to that island.
And I mean, if you're doing a one shot or like a 3
Yeah.
session arc and it is about that island, then like this is where session 0 comes in.
Yeah, and I would also say as well, like, we talked about also the example of the prison break scenario. And this is where sometimes all you need to do to your players is, instead of railroading them, you just need to tell them your intentions. If you're like, players, I'm going to run a prison break scenario, and this is what I'm imagining. Instead of needing to run the actual scene where they get arrested and captured and stuff like that, you can just start the story there.
I've
Right?
done that.
Yeah, and you don't need, like, if there's going to be a scene that is going to happen where it has to happen in one particular way in order for the story to even make sense or move forward, I would just say to your players, hey, everybody, let me set the scene and say what happened. Like, you could literally narrate a scene where you were like, your characters have been exploring the city of Waterdeep for the past few days. And all of a sudden, you remember a lovely night of revelry, but you don't remember what happened. And now you have woken up and you are in the dungeon of the Mad Mage, right? Like, that is a scenario that you could just describe, and that would be a fine way to start an adventure. You could even do that in the middle of a campaign if you wanted to, right? Rather than forcing the players to, like, wriggle and struggle in this situation where they have no options. And so again, there are ways to force a certain outcome without creating the miserable experience that is railroading. And so if you take one thing away from this, right, is if you hear someone saying, my players love being railroaded, or I love running a railroad campaign, probably don't. It just means that you've been running a well-paced linear campaign where your players are still having a lot of fun within the choices that they're still experiencing that agency within all that.
And if you are a DM and you're worried about railroading your players or running a railroad campaign, ask yourself, are you really railroading or are you just running a linear narrative? The key is to listen to your players' ideas on how they want to handle each and every situation that you present to them, how they want to engage with your scenarios. And then you let them choose their own path forward toward the next plot point, and you work with them to make their crazy ideas come to life. And you're not railroading. You're just running a linear story where the players still have agency and the choices are going to be a lot of fun for them.
So is it a railroad or was it just linear storytelling? We would love to hear your examples of good linear campaigns and adventures that you've run or experienced, and terrible railroading stories in the comments below. If you like the work that we do here on our channel and you want to get more content from us, you could consider joining our Patreon community. The choice is yours. We give you lots of options, and you will find many rewards for doing so. All of our patrons get early access to all of our videos a week before they release here on YouTube, and access to our patron-only Discord server, which is an amazing place. Our higher tier patrons also get access to bonus actual plays from us, as well as extra TTRPG game content through our Eldritch experiments, and much, much more. The links are right down below.
And if you want to see me struggling with the broken shackles of a sandbox campaign where all of my choices come back to bite me in the butt, you can watch our actual play in the Worlds of Drakkenheim, which airs Tuesday evenings right here on YouTube. You can check out all the previous episodes right up over here.
We got plenty more coverage and DM advice right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and ring that bell so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.
In the dungeon.